Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Brilliant Minds with a big old question mark. Our little tagline, brains, banter, and being human. Welcome back, everyone. Yes, we are therapists, but we are not your therapist. I'm Olivia, and this is my dearest, closest, bestest friend,
Andrea, hello.
We're going to be talking a little bit about diagnosing today. We, in our last episode, talked a little bit about theories and approaches and not all of our hot takes, but most of our hot takes about theories and approaches. So we thought that talking a little bit about diagnosing would be the next best topic to go with that.
Yeah.
I thought, too, it might be helpful if we start kind of laying some basic foundational knowledge in the case that you're listening to this and you might not know this or not aware. To get reimbursed for therapy through insurance, we are required to diagnose our clients with an active diagnosis from our not quite beloved DSM.
Yeah,
It's
that
actually like
it hasn't been
updated in
updated
forever.
for long. Yeah.
I would also show you it, except my mic is sitting on my DSM because it's the fattest book I own.
I have it
Aha!
accessible.
There
And
you
if you are
go.
watching on YouTube, which you should be watching on YouTube, I've got pretty little tabs on mine,
Oh, that's so cutesies. I should do that.
but it is tattered, it is worn, there's coffee stains on it. This thing has been through multiple lives.
It probably has its own mental health, actually, at this point.
You know, if we could diagnose the DSM, what do you think it would be?
BPD.
I would agree. I would agree. And for anyone who doesn't know what DSM stands for all of those like learning about mental health or exploring mental health in therapy, DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual that the American Psychological Association, psychiatric,
I believe so.
psychiatric, it's written right there, puts out into the world as like a guide. Like a guide, I guess, like definitions of things that could be possibly wrong with people.
Yeah, so let's get into this, right off the bat, which is I'm
Oh,
definitely not up on the history of the DSM. However, just so all of you know, there's been multiple editions of the DSM, and it's changed a lot over time. However, it arguably probably has not changed enough. If you're curious who gets to make the changes in the DSM, the thing again that all therapists and clinicians are using to diagnose people, to get services, to get reimbursement, like all of us are using it, right? It's like creating a shared language, which is important. But the people that are actually determining what's in a DSM are like in some committee somewhere and theoretically experts in the field. But
yeah.
they, like, Andrea and I have no influence or say on who is in the room that gets to decide what's in the DSM, even though we are the ones
Right.
that use it every
Use
day.
it. Yeah. And I don't even know. And again, like you said, I'm not familiar with the structure of the APA or who's involved on the board of that or whatever. But I do know that it's for the most part general practicing doctors or psychiatrists and researchers, not necessarily people who are out in the field. Now, that might be changing from what I am hearing. I do think the ACA, the American Counseling Association, is starting to be part of this, but that should have happened. How long have we had the DSM now? Like a long ass time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I will say too, like I know this is logistics speak, but like the DSM isn't also the end all be all. Like sometimes the DSM will be ahead of what the ICD is, which I don't know what the ICD stands for, but it's like where all medical practitioners use. So your doctor uses it, we use it, everyone uses it. And they're supposed to like talk to each other, the DSM and the ICD, and they don't. There's a lot of things that are not necessarily matching up. So what someone might want to diagnose in the DSM doesn't show up in the ICD, and then we can't use that. So there's like weird gaps and terrible gray areas that make it so hard to use any of these quote unquote resources.
Yeah, and we've talked about this on the podcast before. I think one of the struggles of the mental health field is that we and by we I mean like a general we, I don't really care about this as much, but like we generally are trying to prove ourselves as a science when we are really not. And so when I and can like drawing that into this discussion about diagnosing, even though the DSM sets forth very specific criteria for each diagnosis, you as the professional determining if that person meets the criteria is entirely subjective. As much as we want to make it as objective as possible, it's very subjective, which is why the same client could go to many different therapists and receive a different diagnosis from each one. Now, this could happen if somebody went to the doctor, right? You could get a different diagnosis for your symptoms, but it's a little bit less frequent, I think, because the criteria for health conditions is a lot more objective and a little bit more like data driven, right? And so you're a lot less likely to go to like 3 different doctors and receive 3 different diagnoses, but you would probably need to openly prepare for that if you went to go see 3 different therapists, that they would give you 3 different diagnoses. Yeah,
totally.
It's kind of wild.
You could say one thing to 4 different clinicians in the mental health field and get 4 different answers. And that's not to say that maybe more than one are accurate. And
True,
I'm going to say accurate instead of correct, because I don't believe that there is a correct answer when it comes to mental health diagnoses, because it, like you said, it's so objective and can present in so many different ways and it's so internalized. It's not like, oh, I have this weird like thing on my arm, tell me what it is. Oh, that's eczema. Right? Like, it's very different.
Yeah. And two, in addition, like, I think why diagnosing can feel so complex. Like, there's so many obvious, like, there's a lot of different layers to this idea of diagnosing. But one of the challenges, I think, is just like this idea that we are forced to put a label on something that in a lot of ways is just a normal human experience.
Yeah.
We're having to pathologize and diagnose somebody with a thing so that they can receive support when, like, everyone deserves support throughout their life. Like, just across the board. Everyone deserves all different kinds of support, what they need, different periods of their life. It's also normal and common to like experience anxiety and depression throughout your life in different phases and times.
Yeah.
Should we have to diagnose that for that person to get support? No, like we really shouldn't have to do that. Yeah. And so that's like usually I think the initial pickle that I face when I think about diagnosing is like this idea that we're having to pathologize in some ways just normal human experiences.
Yeah.
So that person can get support.
Totally. And what I want to add to that too is that culturally as well, there are so many implications on your internalized experience or your mental health experience. You know, it's not unique to the United States or the Americas, the DSM type of idea and this diagnosing type of idea. It's not unique to just us, but there are cultures out there and countries and areas of the world where things like schizophrenic style behavior is normal and praised. It's things like becoming a medicine person in a certain culture. It's things like you are a seer in certain cultures. And so it can be difficult and really hard to like talk to someone of maybe a different culture and be like, oh, you have schizophrenia, when they're like, oh, but in my home country, like nobody ever said anything, you know? And so there's so many layers to this, and it feels upsetting sometimes to have to put that label, and it creates this, I don't know, labeling world that we now live in where everyone's out there being like, I have this and I have this and oops, and I have all these things.
Yeah, it's such a double-edged sword because there's so many drawbacks I see to diagnosing, but I also see there are a lot of benefits. And I think the inverse of what you're talking about, the benefit is that it creates a shared language for people to be able to relate to others and to be able to form connections where they feel understood or they feel like they belong, which is so lovely and also critical too for everyone. you being able to say, yeah, I just got diagnosed with ADHD, and somebody else is like, oh, I have that too. And like, it instantly creates this source of connection and understanding that would otherwise potentially just not be there. So
Totally.
there's like such a huge strength to diagnosing because it creates that shared common language, and a lot of, at least I've found, I'm sure you have too, a lot of it creates or can create validation for the client of like, oh yeah, like I
Hmm.
am anxious. Like it's not just my personality.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, like I am struggling with depression. Like it is really like beating me up, right? Or
Right.
yeah, I do have PTSD because that thing I went through is really traumatic and I can't just like bounce back from it or just like be resilient.
Hmm.
So it
Yeah.
is very validating, but there are some like I think really big downsides to it too.
Yeah. It's challenging to approach diagnosing in a lot of ways, like client by client. I think
Mm,
one of the questions I ask a lot of my clients before providing them a diagnosis is, how do you feel about having a diagnosis? Like, do you feel drive or curiosity around wanting to know? Do you not care? Right? Like, I am really curious about how they feel about it because I have worked with people that are like, I don't want a diagnosis that, I think
mm,
this is that's going to make me more anxious or depressed or whatever, or whatever that experience is. And I have had other people, especially neurodivergent people, who are like, I really do want to know. I want to know so that I can find that connection and find that community or make understand myself differently. And so like
mm.
there's so many different experiences in this, and a lot of the hot takes that I have when it comes to diagnosing is the labels within the structure that we're given with this, and being told like, you can't provide services if this person doesn't have a problem. If you're seeing a person with PTSD, you have to use these certain evidence-based practices in some settings, right? And the
Yeah.
risk of not having enough proof for insurance companies that that person has that diagnosis, right? We have to write our documentation to make sure it meets that diagnosis. And that just, where's the person? Where's the person in that?
Yeah, the responsibility of documenting the medical necessity of treatment and therapy, and if you, for those of you who might not be in the field, the term medical necessity is part of why we have to diagnose and part of why we have to prove that that diagnosis is valid for this client and that this person can benefit from the support and that the support will be effective in making them not medically necessary to receive treatment. It's like, it's bizarre.
Yeah.
But it is so weird because when you think about it, it's like I have to prove that this person is like mentally ill enough to need therapy, but not so mentally ill that they need to be in an institution.
Exactly.
What?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, where's the what? Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and what you were talking about with your clients, are like talking very openly about diagnosis and how they feel and all that. I can't tell you how many times, because I know we both do this, I can't tell you how many times I've met with a client and we've started to have a conversation about diagnosis. And I'll ask them in initial sessions and ask all my clients this, hey, these are the things I'm hearing. Maybe you were diagnosed with XYZ before. For the sake of therapy and like receiving this benefit, I do have to put a diagnosis down. Like what diagnosis do you feel most comfortable with? Countless clients have either A or B said, A, no one's ever asked me that before. B, I have no idea what my other therapist diagnosed me with. Like,
Yeah.
which is really heartbreaking to me because there can be so much baggage and weight with a diagnosis. There can be so many downsides to receiving one. The fact that somebody could have one on their mental health record and have no idea what it is so sad. So if you're a therapist out
Yeah.
there and you are not proactively talking about diagnosis with your clients, please take this as your sign that it's really important to talk to your clients about it and give them as much autonomy in it as possible because ultimately it's their mental health and it's their diagnosis.
Yep. Throughout the whole process too, not just at the
Yeah.
beginning, right? Throughout the
Yes.
whole
Yeah.
relationship. And that goes for all therapy situations too, not necessarily just the ones where you have to provide a diagnosis, right? If there's sometimes
Right.
situations where you might have to talk about it. And I've had countless clients come to me and give me this laundry list of diagnoses. And when I hear that, my heart sinks. And it is kind of
Yeah.
that same thing of like, instead of therapists not talking about it, they've been given, oh, you've got this, and this. And it's like, okay. I don't know about you, I think you do the same, but I start from null, always. I'm like, I know you're coming to me and you're saying you have bipolar, ADHD, PMDD, all these things. I'm going to start at 0 and I'm going to give you this today. But the only reason I'm giving you this today is because I have to.
Because I have to, yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's something else I think that's totally important to mention. I agree. It's not just like starting from square one, but in conjunction with that, I'm also operating from a less is more approach. I
Yeah.
am not a clinician that is going to diagnose you with multiple things. Or here's the other like big caveat, or like put in your record that you have multiple diagnoses unless A, it's really important to you, or B, those diagnoses are both things that we're working on and are relevant to our time together. But I can say to this day, I've never put down more than 2 diagnoses for a client, ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find yourself having, this might sound like a weird question, but like a diagnosis that you use more often than others?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think when I first got into the field, I used what's commonly known in the field as the classic like adjustment disorder, which is like the most non-pathologized disorder that's in the DSM.
Right.
Which is basically like, hey, you're not like adjusting to stress or life transitions right now, and adjustment disorder.
But only for 30 days
Correct.
or 60 days, whatever it is.
Yeah, like the event has had to have happened in like the last 30 or 60 days, right? But the adjustment disorder diagnosis itself can only be up to like 6 months.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, it's like within 30 days and then only for 6 months. And then at the 6 months, you have to be like, all right, now what?
Right. Yeah. I typically use anxiety the most because, in my opinion, I think it's one of the easiest diagnoses to prove that people have.
Mm-hmm. Well, anxiety, because anxiety is a symptom. It's so much easier to be like, this person clearly has this symptom.
Yeah. The only caveat about anxiety sometimes is that the symptoms have had to exist for at least the last 6 months. So sometimes that ends up being a little bit more of a pickle for some clients, and then I might go for something more like depression. But I'm careful about the depression one, and I think this is probably more my bias than is anything else.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen historically, anecdotally in my life, that depression is thrown out as a diagnosis more frequently than it really should be.
Yeah. No, I feel the same.
And also, so you all know, like, there are different, basically, like, severity levels for the different diagnoses. So you can have, like, severe depression, moderate, mild, right? I have seen people get diagnosed with severe depression that just categorically do not meet the criteria. And it really frustrates me because, again, there can be so much baggage and, like, negative things that can come from a diagnosis. So we want to do our best to get it as accurate to the client experience as possible. Like, it's never going to be perfect, but it's like, if they're not suicidal, they don't have severe depression. That's the criteria. So, like, why are you slapping depression on all these people? Because, like, that's not it, right? Or I've seen this too, like, people are experiencing grief and loss. And they're like, oh, you're depressed. It's like, well, whoa, like, hold on. Like, they can experience grief and loss and, like, it not be depression inherently. But the depression diagnosis means you only need to have symptoms for the last 2 weeks.
Right. Well, and like you said, depression and anxiety is part of the human experience, right?
Exactly,
like,
yeah.
And I think we've lost the plot a little bit on having emotions and having an emotional experience. Right. And that really, really bothers me. Like, it is, like, I have had so many people come to me being like, I'm just so sad all the time. Well, I'm like, well, look at what's happening, especially during COVID. Where I was like, yeah, duh. Like, I wouldn't expect you to be like joyous all the time, you know?
Yeah. You're
but it
isolated out
is
of your mind. Duh. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I definitely think we've lost the plot a little bit, and I have the same kind of feeling. Like I very, very rarely, I don't know when the last time I used depression was. I don't know when the last time I used even adjustment disorder was.
Oh
I
yeah, that's
do,
yeah.
right? That's like long gone at this point, unless I'm stumped. Um, but I think I use PTSD a lot more because I kind of my hot take with the DSM is that everything is PTSD to a point, where I think it should be structured of this like trauma and then everything else is like a symptom underneath it. It's just how you present your symptomology that is unique and different to your PTSD. I use PTSD quite a lot because I feel like it fits, and there are different severities of PTSD and issues that come with PTSD in the DSM as well, and that could be the longest conversation ever. Um, but I think I tend to use anxiety a lot too, because like you said, it does tend to be the one that is easiest to prove. Um, and then of course, like ADHD is my specialty. It's my niche area. I'm allowed to use it as a diagnosis, so I will occasionally, but only if it's exactly what we're focused on and working on in session.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've joked on this podcast before, and Andrea and I have joked about this so many times that like the female pipeline is like anxiety, ADHD, and then like, am I autistic? And so
Yeah.
I find very similarly a lot of my clients will like start with anxiety because that's encompasses their experience the best. Because again, it's really about like capturing their experience the best way you can. And oftentimes it is like, yeah, you're like ruminating and overthinking. Ha, that's actually ADHD, right? And so I've often changed diagnoses to ADHD. But I've also met with clients that have received different diagnoses that feel that that's accurate to them or maybe accurate to them, but they don't want it in their treatment record.
Mm-hmm.
And as
Yeah.
long as we can come to an understanding of what diagnosis they are okay with and what they're okay with having in their treatment record, and as long as I feel like I can still show up in my role effectively with that, then like I'm good. If you want to leave a diagnosis out, like cool. Um,
Yeah.
but also like jumping back to the PTSD thing, like I really don't like the criteria for PTSD.
No, it it does hurt my soul when I have to like use it or like read it in the DSM, because it is
Yeah.
so inaccurate to the reality of PTSD. Like I think I tend to lean more into, I don't even know how to describe it. Like I use the ACEs a lot. If anybody doesn't know what the ACEs are, that's the adverse childhood experiences one. But there's a way that I utilize it that maybe isn't like other therapists, where I kind of use it in a narrative approach where I go through kind of like these experiences, almost neurodivergent friendly a little bit, where I go through those ACE scores or those ACE checklists, and I'm like, this doesn't literally mean this, right? Like literally this is saying this, but it also encompasses all these other things. And I think that's important to like process and to go through. But the actual DSM criteria for these things, get it together.
That's how
Especially
I
like,
feel.
oh, there's no like there's only chronic PTSD and PTSD. Like, I'm gonna explode.
That's how I feel about when I will do diagnosing of ADHD with folks. I mean, I call it an assessment. Like, it's not formal in the sense I'm using like a formal ADHD assessment. But what I'll do is I'll pull up the criteria from the DSM and we'll go through every single one. The DSM or the criteria for ADHD in the DSM is like laughable. Because it's really like the same thing, which is it doesn't do a very good job of, how do I want to say this? It doesn't do a very good job at identifying more of the core aspects of the ADHD experience and or the behaviors associated with them. So I literally have a little like sticky note on my computer, and it has like all the different pieces of the ADHD experience that are very common that are like affected or a part of that like way your brain works, that I will go over after I go over all the criteria directly about ADHD. Because it's like, if I just did the criteria out of DSM, like, people would be so confused.
The autism one too. Don't even get me started on that one.
Oh, I don't even touch that one because I don't work with a lot of like autistic folks, and most of the people that I do work with have already received that diagnosis.
Right.
So like I just don't even look at it. Just like plausible deniability is my approach for that diagnosis personally.
Yeah, that one is a mess. Like it's got different like you can have level 1, 2, and 3 autism, and I'm just like,
Oh yes, yeah,
hey.
yeah. The severity levels are brutal.
Yeah.
I think this has kind of been inferred in what we've been talking about in terms of the human experience, but something to state more directly is that in general, I kind of see everyone on a continuum with these diagnoses
Me too.
of like you're not experiencing anxiety or depression right now. Great. Like you're on this end. Like, oh, like your anxiety is really high, or just like generally you're a really anxious person, or you experience panic attacks or whatever. Like, okay, like you're more on this side of the continuum. But I don't think any of us like get out of it. Like if we're forced to do some level of pathologizing of mental health, like all of us are on the spectrum.
100%. No,
Yeah, like,
it's I totally agree with that 100%. And you know, there's a reason we're not touching other diagnoses that exist in the DSM. You know, like I was gonna say cluster B, but nobody's really gonna know what that is unless you're a therapist.
basically any personality disorder. You could just do like a blanket statement.
Yeah, any personality disorder, any like what, you know, people traditionally see as like institutionalized ones as well. Like there's so many layers to that. That's not an area of mental health that I have worked in a ton. I have a little bit, but not to like an extent where I could talk about it with great deep understanding. And I think maybe we'll have some guests in the future with some deeper understanding of those things. But I also have to look at those with a trauma lens as well. And just like if I am questioning, you know, I'm going to refer out or I'm going to figure out what's going on. But it is this weird, like the human experience. What is this, right? If somebody's coming to me and they're like, oh, I'm seeing these things or I'm hearing these voices, I have so many questions and I have so many things. I kind of like, I take it with a grain of salt right away until it becomes serious and dangerous. And, you know, I don't think a lot of therapists do that or psychiatrists do that. I think a lot are like, see things, you hear voices. Okay, you're schizophrenic. And you're like, okay, you might just be autistic and you're learning that you have an inner voice in your head.
I agree with you, highlighting that we're talking about the more subjective diagnoses, but they're in some ways, I think there are other diagnoses that are a lot more objective, like schizophrenia and bipolar. There are cultural aspects you have to consider with both of those things. There are a lot of other like human experience things you have to consider of like, okay, what is the client like actually presenting, right? Like, I've had a client or two who their religious and spiritual beliefs, like if I was not the therapist that I am, would legitimately be like, this person is actually delusional, like actively delusional and needs to be medicated.
100%.
But I have enough space and understanding of spirituality and people's religious experiences where I knew that I could tell that that was not this person. This person was not actively delusional. But there are, you know, bipolar and schizophrenia, I would say in general, are a little bit more objective in terms of being able to diagnose somebody with them. You know, like we generally know and can accept like what mania looks like, right? And that's the primary criteria for bipolar. So there are less squishy diagnoses, I think. Yeah. And then there's also ones that like, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to also add like, mania is very specific, you guys. Like, mania is not being hyper. Like, there is a line, and I do see a lot of people that get diagnosed with bipolar that are ADHD. And I want to make that also clear here is that there is a difference between mania and being manic and having ADHD hyperfocus and being hyper.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think too, like switching gears to talking about personality disorders, I think they're still kind of squishy diagnoses in that they're not as objective as something like, or in my opinion, as objective as bipolar and schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you're also going to see them a lot less frequently.
Yeah.
Um, so something to note about the DSM, generally speaking, when we're thinking about any diagnosis, we have to be considering how it's affecting a person's life, their everyday life, the different domains of their life, their work, their relationships, their family, their friends, like all of it.
Yeah.
And so when we think about anxiety, you might be experiencing some anxiety, but if it doesn't really like greatly impact your day to day, technically it's not really diagnosable because it has to be intense enough that it's affecting your functioning. So when we look at personality disorders, there's been a lot of personality disorders that I think have been like overly normalized in society and in our culture. Borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. Like, oh, there's these things like they're a narcissist, and it's like they might have these tendencies, but is it so intense it's like clearly affecting all these areas of their life, right?
Yeah.
Because like
Yeah.
statistically, not that many people have narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, you have to look at the impact on their
Right.
life and the impairment, I guess, of their experience. I look at this
Right.
with ADHD, even with executive functioning, like the day-to-day tasks. How impaired are you on a day-to-day basis with these things, right? Like you might get moments of hyperfocus or things here and there, but like, is it ever to a point where it is impacting your day-to-day functioning? And that is an
Right.
important question, right? Like, is it impacting your functioning? Is it impacting the functioning of your family, of the people around you, like of the things that happen? That is such a big question to when it comes to this like diagnosing experience.
Yeah, and I can see why for some diagnoses that question might be hard to answer at times, right? In my mind, when you were talking about that for ADHD, it's like we hear a lot of, well, everyone's getting diagnosed with that, right? And it's like, well,
Right.
okay, Janet, right? Like, yes, is diagnosing going up for this? Yes. But we're also understanding it better and what it looks like. We're researching it. We're understanding what it looks like in women. And I think we're kind of like catching up to what we have missed in diagnosing. But this basic idea of like, yeah, all people struggle to focus. Duh. Like look at the ads we run now versus the ads we ran 20 years ago. Like there is so much stimulus out there. Of course it's hard to focus and concentrate, and we're always distracted, and we also use distraction as a coping mechanism a lot of times. So like yeah, everyone struggles to focus.
Yeah.
But that's not ADHD inherently. And so having a deeper conversation of, okay, how does not having energy or motivation or concentration or focus, like what does that experience look like for you? How's it showing up? Is it hitting some of these other domains that we know and understand about ADHD now that we didn't just understand before? Is totally relevant because it's like, yeah, we get it, Karen. Like all of us struggle to focus. Not everyone has ADHD. That's not what we're talking about.
Right. Right.
Work with me.
You see how much brain power we have to use as therapists, you guys? Like, this is why we deserve to be paid more. Like,
Only the good ones.
as we're sitting here talking about these things, I'm like, holy shit, there's a lot of like, I don't know, criteria and framework and thought process and filtering that our brains are doing with a client at any given moment.
That's why I think diagnosing is so interesting. And that's why when we were starting this, I was talking about there's so much nuance to this. There's so much context and complexity because we're using something that's ultimately dynamic. The DSM is changing. The human experience is changing over time. Cultures shift, they change.
Yeah.
So, like, this is something that I'm sure we'll continue to talk about for the entirety of our career and afterwards because
Totally.
it's always changing. Like our understanding is deepening, we're doing more research, the DSM itself is changing, right? Like there's so many things in flux here that is such a nuanced conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, whenever we get the latest, I will also note the DSM is not updating fast enough.
1,000%.
But, the next time we see a big shift and a big change, we will see new things. We will see,
Right.
the way impact on AI. We will probably see a new or like some different language around ADHD and autism. We might see different language and maybe in addition to CPTSD, complex PTSD might be added in the future. Like, things that are shifting. I did hear a rumor at some point a long time ago that the whole structure of the DSM might be changing down the line, which I think could be a really good thing. It's things aren't going fast enough. Like you said, culture is changing, technology changes us. We've experienced a massive pandemic and political trauma and environmental disasters and things like that that aren't included in these things that we need to pay attention to when it comes to how humans are evolving in a emotional sense.
Yeah. One of the areas too that I think and hope will change is a lot of the addiction based diagnoses of
Yes.
like what we consider to be a substance and what we don't, and what's considered addiction and what's not. There's a lot of different theories out there for like, can you be addicted to porn, right? Like,
Hmm.
is porn actually a substance that you have a physical withdrawal from? If it's like, no, you don't. So it's not really an
Yeah.
addiction, right? But
Yeah.
it's like a habit. Yeah. So, like, there's a
Right.
lot to change around all these different diagnoses. Like, yeah, PTSD should absolutely be expanded. Like, neurodivergence really
Hmm.
should get expanded. Should OCD move out of anxiety and get moved towards like autism and ADHD? Like, absolutely, it should. It makes sense
Yeah.
to get moved out, right?
And
So,
the gender
uh,
diagnoses in the DSM, like we haven't even touched that one yet. And like that
I don't
one
want to.
is,
It's so
that one is
bad.
the gender and sexual disorders. I don't know what the section is called, but it's something like that, is upsetting. It is
Yeah.
upsetting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't even think I have like clear words on how that needs to be changed. And there was like recently a shift in some of the language with the latest revised DSM. That's not a new DSM, it's just a slightly revised version.
Yeah.
And it's still not great, you guys. It's still not great. Um,
Yeah.
and this is, the gender and sexual disorders section, which I hate saying out loud, is another one that the ICD doesn't match up with the DSM. It's freaking frustrating.
Yeah. And it's also frustrating for other, like, one of the diagnoses that came to my mind when you were talking about that is PMDD.
Hmm.
PMDD is, oh, that's a tricky one. And I think why I see it as being really tricky is that I think a lot of doctors see that as a medical diagnosis
Mm.
to receive from a doc, but PMDD is technically in the DSM, so it's something that mental health therapists can diagnose
Right.
because there's a mood component to it. But I think in the medical field, I've often seen that they see that as a medical diagnosis, not necessarily a mental
Mhm.
health one.
Yeah.
But here's like the other pickle that I see with PMDD is we don't really have great treatment for PMDD. So in a lot of
No.
ways, it's like why even get the diagnosis because there's barely any treatment for it that we found that really works consistently. I mean, pretty much the only thing we do is like, all right, put them on an antidepressant, right? So it's
Yeah.
like there's some times where a diagnosis is a really an odder one because it's like two different worlds are kind of pulling on it. But at the end of the day, I've had conversations with clients about like, do you want a PMDD diagnosis? I think that fits your experience. I'm like, well, what would that change? And I have to be like, pretty much not anything, actually. Just like deepens your understanding of your own experience. You're like, well,
Yeah.
like, I get it. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, I'll just move on.
Yeah. Yeah,
But that
that's a
like
big
doesn't feel
one.
great either. Like to be
No,
like,
that's
oh, here's this diagnosis, but it won't actually change anything.
yeah, I think that concept, right, is as we're talking about all of these things, all of these diagnoses, is what is that going to change? Right?
Right.
Like there are some things like antidepressants I've seen work for people. I've seen anti-anxieties work for people. I've seen ADHD
Totally.
medication work for people. Great, but I don't provide meds, sorry. Like,
Yeah.
what that's going to change for us is, an understanding and a like deeper dive into like what does that mean for you? It's not necessarily going to change anything, but there's this level of like, I accept that and I can use that as a definition or a support verbiage or whatever for myself.
Yeah. And also, as research continues and we learn more about different diagnoses, like we find the ties between things, right? So, I just mentioned really OCD should probably come under the neurodivergent umbrella and be part of the autism, like ADHD grouping, but also PMDD probably should too. There's a
Yeah.
really high crossover of folks that have ADHD or are autistic that have PMDD. Couldn't
Yeah.
tell you why yet, but like it's there. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, that should probably come over, but it's not necessarily a neurodivergent thing inherently,
Well,
potentially, but we don't know, right?
right. Well, have
Yeah.
you ever seen, and maybe I'll add it with our like episode post for this, but there's a graphic of it's the neurodivergent umbrella. And this was just something that I saw that I really resonated with a lot. And this idea of neurodivergence just being different from what neurodominant is, right? Being what normal is perceived as. And under that umbrella was all of these things that we're talking about, ADHD, autism, OCD, PTSD. I think they even had bipolar on there, tics on there, EDS is on there. Like there are so many things that make that neurodevelopment different and unique from what is considered the neurodominant population. And that is going to change a whole lot and ebb and flow. And some things exist with others and other things exist on their own, and it's again like very subjective and very hard to be like what is what, where does it all belong, right? It's more of these like Venn diagrams everywhere, all underneath just being like having a different human experience.
Yeah. Diagnosing, it's very bittersweet. Like I
Yeah.
think can be so empowering and so important. And I also hate it. Like
Yeah.
it's like, man, this is a broken system, but I guess it's better than nothing.
Well, that's exactly it. It's the system that creates the loathing of this. It's the system that makes it so hard to navigate and so frustrating. I mean, even, my husband is a pilot, and people who work in the aviation industry, especially pilots, flight attendants, things like this, cannot have mental health diagnoses on their records. They cannot. They cannot have it in the past. They can like it is so strict and regulated that it's like it prevents them from getting support when they like live a very lonely life. Like it's so frustrating because the system is so damaged.
Yeah. It can be so brutal out there. Because when you think about it, why would you want somebody flying a plane that's just devoid of human experiences?
Exactly.
Would you want to know that they're human and they like give a shit and like have a life? I mean, to
Yeah.
me, right? Because it's like that doesn't make any sense. Of
Right.
course they have a mental health diagnosis. And also, I say this with like all the love in my heart. But you think just anyone is going to devote their life to doing all of those hours and flying a plane
Right.
who's not probably autistic? Fly a kite. Like that. Exactly. Like
Yeah.
it's clearly a special interest. And
I mean,
honestly, out of
totally same
anyone
with
that I want to
coders.
fly a plane, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, this is why neurodivergence is so important. Because out of anyone that I know, I want to have an autistic person who is obsessed with transportation, specifically planes, to be flying the plane I'm in. Because I
Yep.
know statistically they are probably the best pilot out there.
Yep. Or your cruise ship or your train or like your bus.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yes.
that's the strength of neurodiversity is you get these people that are really good at like specific things and have such strong skill sets, and you're like, that's actually the exact person I want flying the plane.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's this topic is so interesting, and there is such a strong need for advocacy with diagnosing. We could even get deeper into the insurance piece of diagnosing if we really wanted to, and how messed up that is, and like when it all comes down to all of the layers, like it is so deep and convoluted, and there are parts of it that I see are so important, and there are parts of it that I see are so
I would say, to sum up like our conversation, if you are a professional, be talking about diagnosing with your clients. And if you're a client, ask what your diagnosis is.
Yep. Yep. You should never be surprised. And that goes for your medical record too. You should never be surprised by your medical record. You should never be surprised by your mental health record. You should never be surprised. You should know what's on there.
Yeah, don't mind me, Will. I have a couple cough attacks. But everything she said, yes.
Yes. So, I mean, I'll wrap up here too with a little piece of like, part of our podcast, we will probably always be touching on this topic here and there. Like I said earlier, I think we're going to have some really cool guests coming up who work with different populations than we do, or who have experienced different things in their lives and have, you know, different experiences with diagnosis and with the DSM. And so I'm really excited to kind of bring this topic throughout all of our conversations, even though it is such a, I don't know, like a passionate topic. I don't know how to describe it, but I think it is one that we are going to continue to talk about, that we will see big changes and impact the way that we work constantly.
Absolutely. I'm excited to keep talking about it. I think it's so fun to talk about it. I think it's complex, and when anything is complex, I'm like, ooh, yes, let's talk about it, because I think this is fun. I like just talking things to death. Let's do it.
Right. Right.
So yes, buckle yourself up, folks, because I'm sure we will be talking about it again.
Oh, for sure. And with the way that we just like banter through shit, like we could go on and on and on and on and on and talk about these things for forever.
Yes, we could. But we will
spare.
monitor. Yes, yeah. We will monitor ourselves this time. So thank you all for tuning in. If you guys have questions for us, things you want us to talk about, topics you want us to cover, always let us know. We tend to be creative with the things we're talking about, but it always helps to have input. So definitely hit us up if you have any. And other than that,
don't
goodbye,
forget
y'all.
to like. Yeah, and don't forget to like,
too.
Comment, subscribe, all those things. Leave us questions, all that jazz. And stay tuned for the Rabbit Trail episode next week.
We love those.
They're so fun. We hope you like them too.
All right, bye, y'all.
Bye.
This podcast is for entertainment, informational, and educational purposes only. Although the hosts are licensed therapists, this podcast is not a substitute for professional mental health services. Listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship.
If you are experiencing mental health concerns, please seek help from a qualified mental health professional in your area. If you are in crisis, call or text a suicide prevention line in your country immediately. In the U.S., you can call or text 988 or use online chat at 988lifeline.org.